Welcome back, everyone. It has been a full day, and I am so excited to be able to moderate this next panel discussion that we'll have together. I'm Dr. Matthews. I'm an Associate Professor of Global Business and Leadership at SNHU and also Director of the Honors Program. I honestly could not sleep last night thinking about this panel presentation for today. The Black women that you are going to hear from today are really going to share just their passion and their heart with you. And when I was thinking about kind of preparing for today, I kept remembering the character Sophia in Alice Walker's The Color Purple, when she made the quote, all my life I had to fight my daddy, I had to fight my brothers, I had to fight my cousins and my uncles. These women that you will hear from have had to fight. And they've done it in such a way that they've not only elevated themselves, but also elevated those around them. Their tenacity to make a difference has inspired others. Their determination to continue to move forward, even when others took credit for their work, they still continued to do. Their commitment to empower our youth, to embody the young generation, the next generation that's coming up behind us. And their love for the people, their love for our Black community is truly what has inspired me in getting to know them. I would like to invite each of our presenters maybe to begin first by introducing yourself before we go into your individual presentations. So if I could just have each of you to introduce yourselves first, and maybe get started with Dr. Corbett.
Thank you, Dr. Matthews. My name is Dr. Corbett. I am the CEO and co-founder of the Second Chance Educational Alliance. We are a 501c3 located in the state of Connecticut, and we provide post-secondary educational opportunities to folks who are incarcerated, primarily in the northern part of the state. And in addition to Second Chance and running it and teaching in it, I'm also consulting with philanthropic foundations that are also doing work around justice impacted students. So I've been working very closely with Lumina Foundation on one of their state initiatives as well, primarily in the northern, which has embarked on a 4-year planning, implementation, and research project around optimizing higher ed in prison delivery at the state level. Myself and Michelle Daniel Jones serve as the external evaluators for that project, and we also are working very closely with a research team that consists of all incarcerated students in the state of Connecticut, and they really serve as kind of the backbone of our team. So that's just a little, that's the quick brief overview.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. Dr. Willingham.
Hi, it's nice to meet you, Dr. Matthews, and I appreciate the opportunity to engage in this discussion today. I'm Dr. Breea Willingham, and I am an Associate Professor of Criminal Justice at the State University of New York College at Plattsburgh. I've been here for 7 years, and I teach courses that are directly related to my research. So I like to merge my research and my teaching with around issues of mass incarceration, particularly how mass incarceration impacts our communities and families. Also, higher education in prison and race, crime, and justice, wrongful convictions, all of these issues that we are seeing playing out in real time, in real life, I bring into my classrooms as well, because I think it's really important for this next generation of criminal justice practitioners to be prepared to deal with a variety of issues that that relate to the system, and I really push them to recognize that the system is not fair and that the system is in fact unjust, And so that, of course, presents its own challenges for me as a Black woman professor at a PWI, and how this then relates to the work that I'm doing with my colleagues, Drs. Corbett and Dr. Muhammad, on higher education in prison and Black women in this space, in which we will talk more about later.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Dr. Muhammad.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to meet you, Dr. Matthews. Greetings to this phenomenal large audience of individuals I've been on since this morning, and I have that just vibe and energy. It's just such a nice motivational space. I'm Dr. Bahiyyah Muhammad. I'm an associate professor of criminology at Howard University in Washington, D.C. I am excited about my current research project, which looks across the nation at success and resilience among children of incarcerated parents. And so for the last year, I've had the opportunity of engaging in very intimate and qualitative interviews with those individuals who are often deemed to be less than, often deemed to be the mistake of their parents who are formerly or currently incarcerated, and getting pathways to how they navigated amazing landscapes into success and resilience, how they are civic engagers, and how we as individuals need to flip the script. We automatically assume that, you know, Black and brown folks, specifically Black children, are less than and are not capable of. And so I've had the honor of engaging in a phenomenal study that highlights what I know just as being a Black woman, as being a Black mother, as being a Black scholar, and being a family member to an incarcerated brother. My work really rests itself on the injustices around mass incarceration and the Black family generally, specifically looking at the children. And I bring this into my innovative pedagogy, in which I teach classes that are just out of the box. They've become known as the Dr. Muhammad experience. And for example, I took 15 students to live in a prison as part of my course curriculum. This allowed for the students to gain an understanding of the importance of common sense, being able to code switch, and also having a backdrop and mechanism for theories and understanding those. During this time, it was the first time that incarcerated women's children were able to come and spend the night at the facility to be able to build the bonds between mothers and their children. Oftentimes, we know during incarceration that this doesn't happen, that we default back to the prison industrial complex, and individuals are used for their hands. And therefore, oftentimes, Black women in carceral spaces are not used for their minds. And so I've been using my classroom as a pedagogy and as a practice to really push forth this agenda of liberation, but more importantly, educational equity. This year, I just signed a contract where I am teaching 100 high school students across the nation in Title I high schools, class, Principles of Criminal Justice, where they will receive 3 credits. In this class, I bring together the teachers, their caregivers, as well as the Howard University students and the high school students, all into one classroom to begin to build the pipeline between high schools and HBCUs specifically. And so today I'll be speaking on my experiences, not only as one of the 3 of co-founders of JAMI, which is an organization that looks at Black women in higher education and prison, but also as an innovator in the classroom, and using that as a platform in order to emancipate those that are deemed to be less than and not worthy. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Muhammad. So excited to have you all here. And our last presenter will be Ms. Stephenson. If you could introduce yourself, please.
Yes, I am Chaquanzha Stephenson, graduated from the University of New Hampshire in 2013. I got a dual degree in political science and justice studies, but there was my first experience with discrimination. So I started an organization called DOPE Inc., which stands for Don't Oppress People, Educate Incorporated. And I started this organization because I was oppressed, but instead of oppressing him, I educated him on the knowledge he needed to know about me. So in doing so, I figured I find a platform for youth, at-risk youth in particular, but also raise them as kings and queens. So I run programs, 2 of the 7-week programs called She's Crowned and King Me. She's Crowned is primarily for high school queens, and King Meet is primarily for high school kings. So we take them through a 7-week transformation course. We learn anything from self-love, financial education, investments, etiquette, mock interview, corporate etiquette, anything you can possibly think of to help them think outside of the box, but also learn some things that they don't necessarily learn in school. At the end of the 7 weeks, we crown them and we give them certificates of completion. We actually give them physical crowns, we sash them, and we really just build royal youth. And we also had our first dope pageant last year where we gave away $1,800 in cash prizes. We had 6 winners. A represents the organization for a full year. We weren't able to have it this year due to COVID, but our last big project is called the Breaking Chains Project. And that's where we work with convicted individuals who can help us deter at-risk youth. So when, in doing so, just giving the inmates a second chance to come back into the community and give back in a positive way, but also become a pen pal for some at-risk. Don't know that, 30 minutes of fame in the streets for selling drugs may cost you 30 years of your life. So just working through a couple of programs and based out of Stamford, Connecticut.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. So my job is to basically be the timekeeper, right? So I'm going to let you lovely Black women do your thing. I'm going to stay out the way. And so let's get started with basically, we'll go the same, would take the same process, the same order. Each of you have about 7 to 8 minutes. I'm just the timekeeper. So just wake us up. We are here to be woke. And Black women are very good at waking a nation. So Dr. Corbett, we'll turn the microphone over to you now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Matthews. You are far more than a timekeeper. But if that's going to be your role, then we humbly accept. So I want to flesh out a little bit more about what Second Chance does that is innovative and creative, particularly in this higher ed and prison space, which really represents a shift in the kind of programmatic paradigm that has been the dominant paradigm in this field. Mostly, these programs they originate out of higher education institutions. And in those institutions, there's obviously, mission and vision and values that guide and govern the academic program, faculty, et cetera. But what higher ed institutions are not equipped to do, because they largely see themselves as separate from the communities in which they're situated, is they're really not equipped. They're not as equipped to do reentry, to do community work. They're not as equipped as community-based organizations. And so Second Chance Educational Alliance is a community-based organization that does academics through coordination with Southern New Hampshire University. We also follow up with our students who are released to provide mentorship, access to opportunities around housing, around employment, and other ways that they can become civically engaged. And we find that this focus on community is really what helps folks succeed when they are released from institutions, when they are able to feel plugged in, feel tied in, feel bought in to what's happening. They ultimately end up being very, very productive. And we think that this model, this community-based organization model, has the potential to really shift the work of higher ed and prison largely, taking it sort of out of the leadership hands of higher ed institutions and putting it into the hands of the community. As we know, that those who are closest to the problems in their communities are often closest to the solution and furthest away from the resources. And so pulling the narrative toward the community-based organization really allows for conversations to develop around how communities build each other up, how communities support each other, and understanding how mass incarceration as an epidemic has destroyed a lot of communities. And it is thus the community's responsibility as a result of the destruction to really take up the mantle to rebuild itself, given
Looks like we're having a little bit of a technical difficulty. Dr. Corbett will definitely be joining us again, but for time purposes, let's just move forward with Dr. Willingham, and then when Dr. Corbett comes back, we'll give her a few extra minutes.
Okay, all right.
And that we are, currently in an environment and a political climate that does not. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think she's still having difficulties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you want to wait for her, or do you just want me to go?
Yeah.
Climate that the justice impacted folks, we need to make sure that we are timely.
Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Willingham.
Okay. Okay. So I wanted to really focus on Black women moving in this space of higher education in prison and higher education as a whole. And I'm speaking. I'm going to speak personally to this because of what's been happening this week, particularly with the Breonna Taylor case, and how that has affected me as a Black woman professor at a PWI, and how it plays into the work that I do in the higher education and prison field as well. And so I received an email this morning from the dean, and it was one of those messages that we see so often from organizations that is just very gratuitous and, hey, sorry this is happening this week. In response to what happened to Breonna Taylor, faculty and staff need to be there for students and support students. And when I saw that email this morning, it hit me especially hard today. So I responded with, keep that same energy when you are addressing the faculty. So if you're asking your faculty to be there for the students, then what are you doing for faculty, especially faculty like myself, who identify with Breonna Taylor, who is a Black woman, and who is carrying this emotional baggage, this psychological baggage, and has to take it into a classroom, whether virtual or face-to-face, and figure out how to be there for students when no one is being there for me. And so I come to you today still carrying that baggage, because right before I signed on to here, I was on a forum with the campus community, and so I expressed my hurt and my pain, because people don't realize that. And as the only Black woman professor, tenured Black woman professor here, a lot of responsibility falls onto my shoulder to have to carry this load. And so when I'm doing my work in higher education and prison too, when I'm going into these carceral spaces, I'm still carrying emotional baggage, and that is of the sister and the aunt of two Black men who are serving life sentences in the state of Pennsylvania. And so we as Black women, we are carrying so much with us as we are trying to, and as we are expected to uplift everyone else. And so I really need people to understand and to hear me when I say we are tired and we cannot do it by ourselves. We are expected now to, Black women got to go vote. We've been voting. Black women, we've been doing our thing. And, a question that I often hear from Black men, well, how can we be there for the sisters? How are you there for your mother? In the same way that you are there for your mother, you're loving your mother, you're supporting your mother, you would lay down your life for your mother, bring that same energy to us out here, because we need y'all. And Black women are resilient, a blessing and a curse. I just heard someone say that yesterday, a blessing and a curse. We cannot be expected to carry the load. And so then when we are out here and we're grinding and we're hustling and we're doing this work, and then some white woman has the audacity to come along and try and steal what we're doing, nah. So then we have to raise up, and then we speak out, and then we're called angry, because we're passionate about what we're doing, and we're passionate about calling people out on stealing from us, but we're angry. Okay, yeah, okay, so what? today, right here in this moment, I am angry. I'm unapologetically angry because I'm unapologetically Black and I'm unapologetically tired. And I'll leave it at that.
Wow.
All I could do. Dr. Muhammad.
Yes, thank you so much for laying that out. That, you know, it's just so true, what Dr. Willingham clearly and passionately talked about. I want to talk about the family, right? A lot of the work that I do is connected to bringing families together. A lot of times people think like, wow, you know, this is so cool. You know, you're teaching these classes inside of prisons and, you know, you're bringing students into prison because individuals are overwhelmed by the media and the perpetuation of this kind of romanticization of mass incarceration. But as a Black woman, there is nothing romantic, you know, about it. In fact, I've been living almost a nightmare out loud, right? You know, I come to an HBCU and I bring in a prison program and I have caregivers and family members that contact me because their children are in my classes and they're pissed off, right? These are other Black mothers, my senior, that look at me and think that it's a joke, right? Because in the media, they perpetuate mass incarceration like it's a rites of passage. You know, I've done research in Africa. There's no rites of passage about no Black brother going into no criminal justice system. At the end of the day, if we don't have the language, let's say that. A rites of passage is about the betterment of a community and a population. It is about creating men out of young boys. It is about love, resiliency, and emancipation. And none of that is a part of incarceration. So when I come into this work, I come strategically, right? Because I have to fight other Black families verbally by letting them understand that you cannot be afraid of a system. And if you are a criminal justice major and you're in my department or in any of my classes, you're going inside of a prison. Because the last thing that I want is for you to be bamboozled from these theories of dead individuals that hated you in the first place to now thinking that that is the roadmap to success. No, that is the miseducation. And so those bars in the prison are not just to keep individuals locked up on the inside, they are also to keep us from going in on the inside. I shepherd in more than 150 Black and brown students every single semester. COVID doesn't matter. Why? Because these are individuals that are directly impacted and never are talking about it. Because everybody thinks it's a rites of passage. So yeah, we're sitting at our kitchen table and we're talking about mass incarceration and, you know, our brother that's in solitary confinement that doesn't get to talk, this individual that almost took his life on the inside. No, it doesn't happen. Because when we talk about it, it makes us vulnerable and then you gotta fight at the same time while you're doing the work. So you cut the rhetoric out and you get to the work because that's how you secure the bag. It's just the way that we've been raised. So at the end of the day, these conversations are more important than ever. When I bring my students into the facility, it's not about a petting zoo. It's not about going in and saying, oh my God, I've been inside of a prison. It's about facing your father that's been locked up his entire life and you've been living a lie and now you're at an esteemed university. How do you accept yourself if you don't accept your root? So when I'm going in, I'm not playing no games. I'm not going in just to teach a class. It's bigger than just credits. I'm going in there with soldiers, you hear me? Soldiers. And when I say soldiers, these soldiers are in search of their truth. It is nothing wrong with your father that is serving a life sentence. There's nothing wrong with your brother that is incarcerated and is doing his time. And why should we continue to punish our families over and over again with a system that treats them as though they were slaves? Because we following behind other individuals. So I say to those caregivers that call me, I understand you, sis, come to the closing ceremony at the prison. So what I started finding was that I was bringing families behind bars. It started with just students, but then these students would go home on spring break and they would talk to their mothers, they would talk to their fathers, some of even their friends in their communities. When they come up for Howard Homecoming, guess who I'm bringing inside of the facility? All of them. You all coming into the closing ceremony because this is something that cuts us all. There's a study that came out that Black women are more connected to mass incarceration than anybody in the world. That means that we are connected to more people that we love, that we trust, and that we tell our secrets to, all at the same time. You can't take that lightly. And then at the same time, you fight in police brutality. You fight in the fact that people want to overwork you because you make it look easy. God gave us that blessing, so don't punish me for it.
Sure.
God gave me that blessing. I'm not your superwoman. I am not to be walked over. I am not to be erased. I am not to be disregarded. And only behind closed doors on a Zoom do you just want all of my ideas out of my brain. I am wise, I am intellectual, and I am spiritual, and I speak for the greater us. I know that you see me and recognize me because I see everything I say in the way that you could code switch. So just by being next to me allows you privilege and access to my people. Respect me enough to pay for that, and respect me enough to be able to work with me so that we really can have allies and not thieves. At the end of the day, this work is more important than anything, and I really think that these sort of platforms where you don't see HBCUs going inside of carceral spaces, we have to change that. These are the communities that the individuals that are incarcerated are coming back to. So how dare we give social capital to a group of students that don't even look like these individuals, but can have really amazing and phenomenal dialogue and conversation without the accountability of applied practices. There's a lot of institutions that go in and they tout that there's this amazing program, but these incarcerated brothers and sisters can't even access your institution. You turn a blind eye, on that. And justfully so, right? Higher ed institutions are not created for reentry. We heard Dr. Corbett say that. But at the end of the day, why make Black women fight to be able to educate their own when we are the ones that are going to be in the community doing the work? When I did a training early on, it was a group of older white women in this training. And may God bless them for the amazing work that they've done across years. I don't take anything from not one soul that steps foot into these spaces because it is draining. It will take away from you. And there's spirits in the prison that will jump on you and follow you home. That's a real thing. There is a spirit of incarceration that people don't talk about. But as a spiritual Black body, I know that all too well. So I applaud my non-Black brothers and sisters. But this is where you get it wrong. When you begin to push us out and try to make us look like these animals so that you can be highlighted in doing the work. Let me school you to something today. And this is coming from a place of love. The Black brothers and sisters that are in carceral spaces, they don't have the social capital to communicate with the Black brothers and sisters in their own families and communities when they're not talking to us. So it's not to say we don't want you there, we don't want you to do the work. We're saying that that code switching and that tough Black love, a white woman can never give it. You're not giving birth to these Black babies and to these Black men that are behind the bars. You don't speak that same language. And so the language you speak is just as important, but it's not a divine language that comes from giving birth to Black bodies. It's something that is hard to understand, but oftentimes people look at that as controversy. And I'm here to say today, no, we all have a space in the work, but allow for those individuals to step up and begin to step back. Oftentimes my ideas are so innovative and creative that a lot of these organizations disown me. They only want to own me when it's safe for them, right? But you also have to understand that when Black women are going into these carceral spaces, it's not a game. It's not a joke. I can't go in there under the guise of it's just a conversation. That could be my throat in the hood. I come from these communities. These are my stomping grounds. I got to answer to those people that are on the street corners. I don't hide inside of an ivory tower. My family still lives in those communities. So when I go in, I got to do real work, right? So allow those sort of things to happen. And please begin to increase your vocabulary. Passion is not anger. Love is not thirst. Ignorance is not always bliss. And oftentimes the things that you can't understand, it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with it. And it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with the individual. It just means that we all have to kind of step back and do work. I think I'll stop there.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Muhammad. Lots to think about. Just want to remind everyone, if you have questions, we will have a question and answer session.
Because they are our future. And as leaders, as activists, we have to pass the torch while it's still lit. We have to give them a chance to express themselves. I feel like a lot of times we look at them and we think we know the answers. We try to develop solutions on what we think, but if we listen to them, they will tell us exactly what they need. So right now with this generation, they are influenced a lot by social media, the TikToks, the Instagrams, the likes, the subscribers, and that kind of validates who they think they are. So I'm big on individuality and leadership, helping them really do a deep dive to figure out who they are. So when we run our courses for our kings and queens, we first talk about self-love, because I feel like if you don't love yourself, you can't love anyone else. And I feel like that's what the world is missing right now. There's a lot of people in this world that do not love themselves, so they're out to hunt other people and show their misery. And we've got a lot of situations and we're hurting right now as a people. But just exhibiting self-love to our royal youth, changing their mindsets. They might come from broken homes. We speak about incarceration. We speak about drug addiction. We speak about all these things. Are we really getting down on their level to understand exactly what they're going through right now? Because they might be getting kicked out of virtual school right now because they don't have the funds to even survive. You know, they're facing evictions. They don't have food. They don't have internet connection. Are we really taking the time to understand this generation and being an activist that represents them, because representation matters. So I'm big on showing my stripes, showing them that I'm a regular person. I don't need to be a Cardi B. I don't need to show my body. I don't need to be twerking, but I can get everything that you think you can't get because you're not a rapper, you're not an athlete. You know, so I'm really big on showing them anything is possible so long as you put your mind to it. But what do we need to do to change your mindset? What do we need to get you out of that slave mentality of thinking that you are not good enough? Because they don't see themselves in positions that they think are reachable. You know, they don't see themselves as a Steve Jobs. They don't see themselves in the tech space because we don't have people like us in those realms where they can say, okay, if she can do it, I can too. If he can do it, then I can too. So I'm really big on just helping the students find their true identity. And in doing so, I've had students that come back to me, and I've mentored them in 2017, and they put on Juneteenth celebrations this year. Juneteenth was like a whole new thing this year, even though it's been a thing for years, but I feel like it became a new celebration. So watching the youth that I mentor put on their own events, where usually I'm inviting them to my event, like, you better be there, I better see you there. And they're like, Queen, can you come and show your support? Can you speak? You know, we had a large protest in Westport, Connecticut that was put on by students. It was the largest protest in Connecticut. And again, I'm just proud to say that being a mentor, showing that representation, showing that it is possible so long as you put your mind to it, you can do absolutely anything. So I'm big on just passing the torch while it's lit, not giving up on our youth. Sometimes they stray down the wrong path and they don't have the guidance to rail them back in, but it takes one of us to really understand and be willing to be there on the forefront, not just saying we want that action, but being about that action. So really just honing in on their struggles, really being vulnerable, being able to say where our mistakes are, being able to say, you know what? My mom was a teen mom. That's what deterred me from, you know, having sex at an early age. What do you want out of life? I have a brother who's incarcerated, been incarcerated for over a decade, still there. But being able to say, I don't have it all together, because any person that faces a family member that's incarcerated is a broken home. Essentially, we miss out on tons of celebrations, tons of everything, and then you don't have family pictures. So how does that affect you? Oh, by the way, Queen, my dad's incarcerated. Oh, by the way, Queen, my mom is a crack addict. Oh, then they start to come out and really feel comfortable sharing. So you gain that rapport. So now it's like, here we go. All right, I knew I can get you under my wing. I had queens that come up to me and said, I've been having raw sex since I've been a sophomore, and you're not going to change me. And by week 7, when we're crowning them, right under my wing, you know? So really just being able to show vulnerability, being able to say, I've been fired before. I worked in corporate America, and I know what it's like to be in a boys' club where things are whitewashed. And I know what it's like to be pushed out. No matter how hard you fight 4 times as hard, and you still are the first person to go. Being able to share those mistakes and experiences is what shows them that, you know what, she was able to go through trial and tragedy, but she came out of it. You know, so I do the queens, and I have male professors that do the kings, but it's all about just building this real youth. So I'm so big on giving back to the youth, and everyone here just seems so energetic, so lively, but just don't forget about our babies, because they are the future generation, and they need us and we need them.
Thank you so much. Thank you. A couple of questions to get the conversation started, and I'll pose this question to all of our panelists. How do you get your strength to continue? Where does that come from? How do you find your resilience?
And is that for all of us?
Yeah, for all of whoever wants to jump in and tackle it. Yeah.
It's really just knowing that when God closes one door, another door is open, and it's going to be way better. It's really knowing and having that faith in him to know that literally anything can happen. He works in mysterious ways. His timing is impeccable. So I have that resilience because I know that I can't give up on me, and I can't fail until I give up. So it's never.
I like that.
You know, I think it's interesting that you asked that question, and particularly today, because I have not been feeling resilient. And I remember Dr. Muhammad asked me the same question over the summer when she interviewed me for her project on children of incarcerated parents. She asked me to, you know, what does being resilient mean to you, or something to that effect. And, you know, I said, you know, I have no choice but to be resilient because I am a Black woman, and in particularly being a Black woman in this space, you know, where my environment is so white. But being resilient for me also means recognizing when I need help, and also recognizing that, you know, it's okay to need that help. I think too often we get caught up in we have to be strong Black women all of the time, but that being strong comes with the price, because sometimes we neglect ourselves because we're trying to be there for so many people. So, you know, my truth today is that I'm not feeling very resilient. That I am, you know, that I need the help right now so that I can continue. And that's part of, I guess, you know, how I define being resilient, and also how I define being strong. And yesterday I received a text message from a former student of mine, and she told me, you know, that she was on a job interview, and one of the questions was, you know, where do you see yourself in 30 years, or how do you see yourself in 30 years? And she said that she told them that she hopes that she is like me in 30 years, you know, and because I was for her that example of, you know, of a strong Black woman and a successful Black woman. And that gave me a little bit of life, but it's still, even today, you know, it's resilient. I don't know if I am right now in this moment.
I think, and I'm so glad to be rejoining. I'm hoping that y'all can at least hear me. There's, I've always been a strong person, a resilient person, and that comes from, you know, childhood trauma, etc. As I've grown and just become more settled and more part of this space, the things that like grown for me and motivate me and give me the ability to just kind of wake up and keep doing the work is when people tell me I can't. When someone tells me you can't launch this program, you can't do this, you can't make these systems work together, you can't do this, and I'm like, I can show you better than I can tell you. And so I think that there's a piece for me that that the external questioning of my ability and my skill and my ideas and my creativity is what fuels me to do better and better and better. You know, I think there's another piece for me that touches on what Breea was mentioning, when you just get that kind of random letter from a student, text from a student, email from a student that comes, it always seems to come at the right time, say the right thing that really reminds you why you do what you do. And so similarly, I had a student who was able to participate on a briefing on Capitol Hill via Skype. He's currently incarcerated. And one of the questions that someone asked from the audience was, you know, what do you want to do when you get out of prison? And he was like, I want to work with Dr. Corbett. And I was like, oh, that is wonderful and great. And, you know, and it's those kinds of moments where you're like, okay, now this is a reminder of what's happening. But again, knowing that this world is always going to tell us that we can't do something, that we are not good enough, that we are not enough, right? We are constantly getting the message that we as Black women are not enough. We are not valued. We are not loved. We are not protected. We are not supported. We are not amplified. And every day we have to wake up and fight that. And doing so requires exactly what Breea said, finding those moments where you can admit to yourself that you need support, but also being proactive in creating the kinds of community that you want to have to support you. And so I know I talk to Breea all the time when I'm stressed out about something or something's not working, or I just need to have like a thought partner because I need some outside ideas and thoughts and perspective. And it's a very deliberate cultivation of that community. It is largely why we founded JAMI, so that other women can have that community as well. And hearing from those women who are like, this is exactly what I've needed. I've needed this for like 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. Where were y'all when I started? Personally, I may have been a child, but you know, the point is, you know, we are opening up these spaces in ways that have been needed. And that also is a source of motivation to keep going.
For me, I would say that, you know, I'm very innovative and creative, right? That is how I remain resilient, because it allows you to work smarter instead of harder. So for example, you know, not only that innovation, but also really leaning into family. Prior to getting on the 10-year track, which would have, you know, this is a 7-year kind of investment that you're up against. Typically it would be an individual up against it, but it was a conversation with my whole family. You know, my husband, my father, may he now rest in peace, my children, who are only 7 and 10 years old, still sitting there engaging in a dialogue about what this meant for a family. You know, and so when I thought about my first publication, that was my resistance, and that was my way of being resilient in creating a publication called Mothering from the Field. And what I talked about with my family in this plan towards tenure was that I'm not gonna mess up my marriage. I'm not deciding the ivory tower over my loving husband. I'm not deciding the ivory tower over my beautiful Black children. I'm not deciding the ivory tower over my community or my commitment to anyone, but we together will be successful on this track. And so literally we like came up with plans, thought about what that meant moving from New York, New Jersey into DC, what it meant for the children to have that rich experience on an HBCU campus. You know, was the job really worth it? And we decided that we would do it together. My husband, you know, is a videographer, and he's worked on like 12 Years of a Slave, RoboCop. I mean, he's been on the set of really, really top movies, but would be away for long periods of time. And so we decided that we would merge our work together. On the tenure track, the entire family decided to prioritize me. And that gave birth to the Dr. Muhammad experience, because it revolved around this work on criminal justice, where I became the writer of the research, but he captured it in vivid depiction through his camera and through his videography. But it also meant that I could love my husband because he knew my research. It meant that we didn't have to fight with each other. It meant that when I go into prisons, he's going in there too. So I'm teaching the class and he's the videographer behind the entire thing. It meant that in my budgets that I was writing to travel to Uganda, Africa, and stay for 3 years, like Brea, my babies were running around in the sand dunes there. They were playing with the beautiful African children and understanding social justice up close and personal. My husband was taking the pictures, and I was capturing that data that then would be brought back to help me be successful on the tenure track. So that was how I became resilient, by just using innovation and creativity. I know that there's so many pieces that are kind of connected to the work that I do. So I remain resilient by giving myself, no matter what, time to think. I carve that out from anything, time to think, and I don't let anything drain me, right? So when I know I have to go home, I still keep that 2 hours in me. When I come in the house, I could play and dance around with my daughters for 2 hours after a long day of work, so that they understand that they are the priority, they are first, and that they get to see all of the components around what it is that I do. And I'm also open in my conversation. That's how I remain resilient. I don't have to lie about anything that I do. I'm not ashamed of my work in the prison. I'm not ashamed of not one publication. I'm not ashamed of anybody that I partner with. If I'm on Zoom with you, it's not you and me. My family can also hear our conversation because there's nothing there that's not connected to them. So the way that I maintained the resilience was connecting everything 360 degrees. Even in that publication, Mothering from the Field, my husband is a co-author on one of the chapters where we talk about Wakanda Forever, where we were raising our children in Africa, and we decided to create a side project. And that side project was our excitement. So we would get one suitcase and I would, fill it up with all of these princess gowns and dresses. And we would take our children into these remote countries, Bangkok, Thailand, Dubai. We would put these beautiful gowns on and my husband would do a photo shoot. He would select a picture and then I would write the story. And this is a secret book that we're working on for them when they get 18 or 21. And that was our way of keeping a surprise with us, making sure that, this job doesn't take care of over our love for each other and what we're trying to do with raising our children, but also it allowed us to celebrate. I celebrate all the time. When I have a good day, I may get a color of red polish and paint my nails. I may go in and take a bath and nobody disrupts me. I put my candles on and my incense. When I get really excited, I get in the car, I put my mask on, and I blast out to my trap music. Curse words and everything, no kids around, it's just me, and I'm enjoying screaming at the top of my lungs. So I celebrate everything. Little accomplishments, big accomplishments, huge ones, sometimes by myself, sometimes with the family, sometimes with the larger family. And so I'm very strategic about my resiliency and my ability to be innovative, so that I always have what we call in our family checkmate. So it comes a time now where I'll just come home, I'm texting my husband and my daughters throughout the day. And when I walk in the door, they like, checkmate, and that's how you know I bossed up. And now we're all celebrating over a nice dinner. We all have to eat dinner, and I may have to miss the bar or, a small snack, but I make sure that I acknowledge the queen inside of me so that she never dies. I also maintain my youthfulness by lifting up my children and allowing them to guide us at the same time that we are working to teach them what is good, what is bad, and what's indifferent in this crazy world.
Thank you. There's a question that came in from the chat. For the prison system seems built to make people invisible for profit. More is invested in prison jail than programs to keep people out of the system. How can we make an impact in this area? Any suggestions for us to get started?
So I'm always going to start within the community. Who are the people that are going to bring folks together in your community? Who's going to help you articulate what your demands are, right? So I think there are these broader conversations about mass incarceration, about the criminal legal system, and they're going in a lot of different directions. And when you are trying to make structural change, there's a lot of organizing, community organizing that has to happen so that demands are clear, so that strategies and methods are clear in terms of how you are interacting with different people. I think another important piece as part of that organizing is figuring out where the critical lever points are, right? So again, I'm a systems person, and when I look at mass incarceration, it is the interaction of systems, right? And so figuring out, doing a power map, who's in power, how long have they been in power, what do they have power over, and how can you leverage their needs and desires to get the things that you want? How can you put pressure on those people in power to get what you want, to get what your people need, to get what your community needs, to be the best? And so start with the community, but also understand the importance of being civically engaged and not just going out to vote for president, right? We need to understand how our municipal systems work. We need to understand how our state level systems work. Do you know who your state representatives are? And if you don't, do you know how to figure out who they are? Are you interested in having conversations with them from constituents so that they're thinking about policy changes that need to happen? How do we build all of these pieces together so that what you ultimately have is a community that is feeling more and more comfortable with holding elected officials responsible? Because as much as there are going to be people like us who are also working from the inside, right? So Higher Ed in Prison is one of those internal levers where we're working with the people inside to make some change. There has to be equal, if not more, pressure coming from outside, from externally, to amplify that pressure so that these systems are feeling what we want them to feel and reacting in the way that we need them to react.
Thank you. There was another question related to what advice would you give to young Black women trying to find or better develop an understanding of how to use their voice?
I can answer that. Being a Black woman attending a predominantly white institution, it's literally just starting. Again, that was my first time ever experiencing discrimination. And I was very scared to call out the person that did it, but because he used the N-word, referred to Blacks as animals, just had a big issue with Black people as a whole, it was having the courage to start, but also having people to support you was a big thing. I don't think I would have been able to push through without having a support system behind me. So definitely being able to use your voice and starting, but also it gets easier. So once you do it, it's literally, you're not going to tolerate anything. You're going to want your voice to be heard. You're going to want to be a change. You're going to look at the effects of other people, because what happened is it became a domino, like, oh, if she did this and she said this, then I can say this, and we're not going to tolerate X, Y, Z. So once you see other people following suit and now you're building an army with you, you're going to be unstoppable.
And I would like to, if I can, just follow that briefly and say that, once you do, first you have to understand that you do have a voice. I think too often people try to tell, especially young girls and young Black girls in particular, that they don't have a voice, or if they do speak out, then they are somehow being disrespectful. But I would encourage all young Black women to just speak, right? And tell your story. Be the authority of your own story, of your own voice, because if you're not, then other people are going to speak up for you, and they are going to speak wrong about you. Don't ever let someone else be the author of your story or the owner of your voice. That's how we are drowned. That's how we are oppressed. So find your voice. Your voice is there. All you have to do is just speak it.
I wanna co-sign that. I would even say we all know that there is the trope of the angry Black woman. We have our young girls who are disproportionately disciplined in elementary, middle, and high schools. We have lower numbers of our sisters who are seeking educational attainment. There are just so many, again, looking at this from a systems approach, there are so many different pieces that come together to disempower and disenfranchise Black women. And the lever that's used, the language in the lever that's used is, you're asking for too much too soon and you're so angry. Lean into that. You know, we can no longer afford to operate from a place of fear of that label being thrown at us. You know, and I'm looking at our panel. I'm sure that all of us have had the angry Black woman label thrown at us. I know specifically for Breea, Bahiyyah, and myself, it was thrown on us recently. And so you can't shy away from that. You can't operate from a space of saying, I can't say this because they're gonna think of me as the angry Black woman, because guess what, they already do. And so you might as well use that to your advantage to get your point across, to reach out to elected officials that you need to hold responsible and say, I'm going to talk to you about this issue that is important to your community, and I'm going to use my voice to do it. You might think I'm angry, that's fine. But if that's what it takes to get you to move, then that's what I'm going to do.
I would definitely co-sign that, all of that that's been said. And then I would just add that I think it's important for individuals to have an understanding of their social identity, you know, to move from a label and move into your social identity. The social identity allows for you to have agency, but it also allows you to identify with who you want to, that you see within yourself. And therefore it gives kind of a starting point for organizations, institutions that you can reach out to. So if you are a Black woman doing work in higher ed and prison, please reach out to me if you identify, you know, in that space, because we are creating and have a sisterhood, very strong sisterhood globally, not only nationally, but globally, that we are holding hands and walking through. And that's from the juvenile justice system all the way to parole when you're coming home. So I think being able to figure out what you want to identify as is a part of owning your own agency. And then I would also say, like my mother always used to say, that everything that you're good at takes practice. So, you know, get used to talking and sharing your story in different environments and in different places. You may start at home with the brothers and sisters, and that's the best way to spar, to figure out, because they're gonna rip you down and prepare you so good to, you know, go on the outside world. But that's where you could kind of start sparring and sharing your narrative and your story. And it'll be interesting even within the family, because as I share my narrative, my sister's like, oh yeah, I remember when you were born and you did X, Y, and Z, and I saw this part of you. And so it not only builds your identity as an individual, but also within a family and then ultimately within a community. And the best way to go about it all is just to talk in these different spaces, in classes. You know, when you feel like you're nervous and it's like, oh, they're saying something, I don't know what I should say. Maybe you say one sentence that day, and then it'll prepare you for, you know, a 2-minute kind of feedback. And then you'll hear other people's questions, and then you'll see who your fans are. You'll see who your enemies are. You ultimately can get strategic, but talking takes practice. And that means that you have to be doing it, you know, often. I remember I said to my mom about this guy in high school that I used to talk to on the phone. And I was like, Mommy, oh my God, he speaks so good on the phone. And she just bursted my bubble and was like, yeah, because he's probably talking to a whole lot of people, you know, on the phone, a lot of girls. And that was when I started realizing that everything just takes practice, regardless how old you are, regardless how young you are. Iron sharpens iron. So once you start building that narrative in these different environments you go into, it'll come together. Last piece I would say is get a journal. Get a journal. Write these things down. And now with technology on your phone, you have voice record. Tell your story to yourself and then go back and listen to it. You could even go on a Word document and start talking or playing the recording, and it'll type it for you. So you have your own personal transcriber on your laptop. And that will allow you to start seeing your story. It's one thing to see it. It's one thing to hear it. And it's a completely different thing to feel it in your spirit. So there are different levels to the narrative as well. And the more that you navigate through it, I think you become more unapologetic. Sometimes you'll tell your narrative and it'll be a curse word every other word. Own it, because there will be an audience that speaks and engages in that way. There'll also be an opportunity to, pull it out. It's your story. So you have your climax, you have, your characters, you have, the language. There may be some parts of your story you might want to be speaking Xhosa, depending on where you're from. You may, have one piece of your story that's spoken word and the other piece that reads differently. Be innovative and creative in the way that you want the world to see your story. And that'll also allow you to keep dreaming. I think that's the last piece that I would say is that never stop dreaming, regardless of the viciousness that's happening in the world. When you lay down or when you close those eyes, when you say your prayers at night, when you just close in and woosah, make sure that you always dream, regardless of what happens, because that refreshes your brain and your mind, and it allows you, if you're blessed to see another day, to take it on strongly.
Yeah. Thank you. Another question that came into the chat is based on the understanding that once an individual is released and they're returning to the community, they're faced with many obstacles and challenges, whether it's trying to get a job, finding adequate housing. What are your thoughts or contributions or ideals for resources for these individuals when they come out of the system?
So I think a lot of that is location specific. So I would encourage folks who are interested in these aspects of reentry to become familiar with what's already happening in your communities. What are the organizations that help systems impacted people with housing, with healthcare, with employment? I would also encourage people to consult the National Inventory of the Collateral Consequences of Conviction. They have federal level data, and they also have state level data that outline every sort of state constitutional statute that supports discrimination on the policy level against systems impacted people. Because if you don't know what the problems are, where they come from, then you're not going to be effective in fixing them at the root. And a lot of the problems stem from the policies and legislation that has been passed when we think about bail reform, sentencing reform, parole, community supervision reform. All of these come down to, one, the legislative language that's used to govern people on supervision, and number two, the implementation of all of those pieces. I think another piece to think about that has been sort of weighing more heavily on my spirit, because Second Chances programming is in a maximum security facility. When you have people who have served 15, 20 years inside of a correctional facility with no access to technology, internet, anything really, when that person gets out, it is a different kind of acclimation or reacclimation that happens versus someone who maybe was in for a year or 2 years recently. So that includes, how do we create programming or find others who are doing programming that shows people how to use a phone? It's something simple to those of us in the free world, but I had a student who served 22 and a half years, and he didn't know how to use a cell phone, didn't know how to access the internet to apply for jobs, because most things are online now. And so there are these everyday kind of things that we take for granted that can be very overwhelming for someone who has served a quarter of a century inside a facility that relegates them to pen and paper only. And so I think we need to be a little bit more deliberate in how we conceptualize reentry and reacclimation for people who have served long sentences, and make sure that our programming is nuanced enough to reflect our understanding of those different kinds of scenarios and circumstances.
Thank you. The next question I have is for Queen. The question relates to, where do you see DOPE in the next 5 years?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So in the next 5 years, we actually just started a project where we're looking to build in Ghana. So we do have presence in Ghana. We've been to Ghana, Jamaica, and the Ivory Coast. I studied abroad in Ghana in 2011. I did a comparative legal analysis when I thought I wanted to be an attorney, and that did not happen, but I fell in love with the continent and the country. So we're actually looking to build a resource center where we'd be able to not only bring students from the States over there, but get them acclimated with students that are there so they can see how privileged they are, because I see students here that take school for granted so much, where if they don't have their hair a certain way, they don't have the latest J's, they don't have certain things, they're not showing up to school. Where over there, there are kids that are literally dying to get to school, but they just cannot pay the school fees. So with the resource center, we'll be able to have classrooms, so we can have professors come over from either the University of Ghana or neighboring universities, or just regular teachers. We also will provide lodging at the top floor, and it sleeps 40. And then at the bottom, and it's also on our website, so if you saw our website, you'll be able to see kind of what the plan looks like. The bottom floor is set up like a banquet hall, so we'd be able to hold community events in Ghana, but also when we bring our students over, they'll be able to use the facility as a one-stop shop. There's outdoor amenities and all types of crazy things. So it's a 5 to 7 year project. So along with doing things here in the States, the bigger picture is to build and expand and invite students all over.
Wow, thank you. That's amazing. There was a question for Jamie. How can I go? How can I find access to Jamie?
Website. Well, website we're still building, but if you just Google Jami Sisterhood or go to jamisisterhood.com or jamisisterhood.org. Also, you can find us on Twitter at Jami Sisterhood. That is probably the best place to start. And I manage we all manage the account, but I'm primarily the manager of that account, so I tweet often. So if you can find us through Twitter, then you can find us everywhere. But we also have a webinar coming up in November. You'll find more information about that on Twitter, but just throw it out here real briefly. The next webinar is for Black mothers who have incarcerated children. So that's a little tease for you. Go to Jami Sisterhood on Twitter and you'll find the registration link, and we look forward to having you.
Thank you for sharing that. In our last 5 minutes together, what would be your parting words to this community? And each of you can have a minute to respond to that. Your final parting words to this community.
I want to say use your voice. Your network is your net worth. So a lot of Black women leave a lot of money on the table when they don't use their voice, when they don't negotiate, coming from a person that works in corporate America in HR. I see it a lot where there's a lot of money left on the table simply because we don't know our value. So we don't know to ask for more. We think what they're giving is enough. So really loving yourself, identifying your value, and knowing exactly what you want, really being specific with yourself, because again, you leave money on the table when you don't.
I will follow up and say, create your own opportunities. Don't wait for people to give you your opportunity. Don't wait for that proverbial seat at the table. Build your own table, build your own seats, because that's what we did with Jami Sisterhood. We recognized that we were not being represented in the higher education and prison field. Our voices were just missing. And so we created our own organization. And so I just implore that and encourage everyone out here to don't wait. Do you?
What was really helpful. Oh, go ahead, Dr. Muhammad.
Dr. Muhammad, you're on mute.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. One of the things, thank you. One of the things that I would say is see each other. We have to see each other, guys. I mean, literally, like if you see a Black sister have a soft heart, speak to the sister. You see her head down. Hey, sis, what's good? Keep it moving. It doesn't have to be a long conversation. Treat it like it was like if we was down south, I know through COVID, we don't get to kind of walk past each other as much, but even in a virtual space, you see a sister on the hey says, I see you, you know, send a private message. You know, we need to allow people to see us seeing each other. And I mean, fourth eye, fifth eye, sixth eye, the eyes behind your head, like really seeing each other. And the thing that I hope for this audience to be able to hear and pass on is that don't allow people to see you fighting the system, you know, in language, in email, in, you know, we could always pull up on each other. You know, keep it gangster, keep following the codes of the street. Don't adopt to these, you know, methodologies from those that have colonized. And now you use that against your own. It's talked about in post-traumatic slave syndrome. I just see it too much. Where the sisters are bickering and fighting when the individual that sparked that fire don't look like neither one of them. And they get caught up in the okie doke. So it's kind of like you're of this world, you're in this world, but you're not of it. You're in this world, but you're not of it. And if there are issues, it's not to say brush it under the table and allow anyone to slight you, but pull up on a sis. You know, we know how to get in touch with each other. Don't put that out there for everybody because that's what they're looking for. And that's what causes individuals to lose sight of the reality of what's going on. They do it with all of the family members, but mostly with Black women. They almost, you know, sitting back with that emoji with the popcorn, just eating like they're watching a TV show. And it's nothing funny about it. And it actually takes a lot of energy. So I would say don't waste your energy on fighting a fight that was already started against you. Let's love each other. And sometimes that does have to be for a distance because you know some of all kinfolk ain't the real folk. And so we gotta love each other more. I don't really know how to say it any better than that.
And I would add, to the extent that you can, get a mentor in the field that you are looking to be in. I would not be anywhere where I am right now without my mentor, who I sort of snagged in undergrad and made her my mentor, and she didn't know until I told her. But recognize when there are Black women in the positions that you're trying to get to, or at least are in a space in life that you to which you aspire, and talk to them. You know, it's like when you talk to Big Mama and them down south, and you just kind of sit at their feet and listen to what they tell you and listen to the lessons that they have learned over their lives. Your professional mentor should be able to do something similar, where you can again sit at their feet and just say, I'm having these problems, I'm having these struggles in this space. How can I navigate this space or that space or this conversation? Because what you'll often hear from them, especially if your mentor is a Black woman, is you're going to hear exactly what Bahiyyah, Dr. Muhammad said, where you don't ever let anybody see y'all fighting. You don't ever let anybody see any kind of cracking the shield, because we are all in this fight together. And so I would say get a mentor, and make sure you also understand that you teach people how to treat you. So when they say things to slight you, make sure you correct them, certainly in a professional, diplomatic, whatever way, but make sure that people know that you are not the one ever again.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for sharing your truth, your projects, your work. I, as a Black male, can honestly say that if we just follow the lead of Black women, we'll be in a much better position. I know my mentor, Dr. Corbett, has been instrumental in my knowledge. She's always sending me articles to read. She's got me writing letters to the president of my organization. All I got to do is just follow her directions, right? And I have learned to do that. I have learned to really use my privilege as a Black male in an institution of higher education to really further this work. And for that, I am truly honored to all of you lovely Black women today. And thank you so much for sharing that. And I look forward to, in the future, continuing this conversation again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Well, thank you all for being part of this conference. My job here is just to give instructions for what comes up next. So I appreciate the learning that we had, the information that you shared, and for the time that each of you had spent with us. Thanks, Chris, for moderating this panel. The conversation room will open, and there are moderators in there. If any of the panelists want to be in the conversation room, you just go right ahead. If for some reason there isn't a moderator in the conversation room, please can you help out to just guide the conversation? I just want to remind everybody, after the conversation room closes, this morning to afternoon session is complete, but we have the evening keynote address, which you can log on to starting at 6 o'clock, where we'll have Susan Taylor delivering that keynote address. So I hope you'll all return for that, and that we can engage in some more stimulating, edifying, heartfelt, very vulnerable conversations. Thank you all so much, and enjoy the breakout sessions.